All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good evening. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight to talk about the Windsor-Osborne Special Area Plan with the City of Brookhaven. I am Allison Stewart Harris. I'm the project manager and I run the community planning practice at BHB in Atlanta. I'm here with some really great colleagues tonight. We have a lot of folks on the phone, but I just want to introduce a couple of us. We got Amanda Hatton from Blue Cypress. We have John Stover, who is our market analyst from John Stover and Associates. And we are working really closely with the City of Brookhaven staff. And tonight on the call from them, we have Linda Aberay, Rhonda Smith, Drew Murray, and Dominique Lockhart. So thank you all again for participating. And we will go ahead and get started. For tonight, we will be meeting until about 7:30 or so. If you joined us for our first public workshop on this project last month, you'll get a little bit of a review of the project, but we will be starting with a project overview, talking a little bit about what the situation is today at Windsor and Osborne. Amanda's going to talk a little bit about what we've heard so far through the public process. But really, we want to spend the bulk of our time tonight talking about the community vision. We'll be sharing some draft concepts that we've created based off of the input that we heard from the meeting last month and a bunch of other sources. And then we're going to break up into small groups to really dive into those draft concepts a little bit more and really make sure that we're getting great feedback from you all. We do have a couple of engagement guidelines. You can go ahead and read these, but it's basically just please be nice to each other. Everyone's opinion is valued. We want to hear from everyone. But probably the most important one is, we only have a limited amount of time and we really encourage y'all to kind of stay on topic. There's a lot of different projects that are happening right now near this intersection, but this project is really focused on is the development around Windsor-Osborne. So it's not about the roundabout. It's not about the Linwood Park improvements. We're really focused on the potential for development right around the intersection. So if we could stay on that topic, that would be really helpful. So with that, let me go ahead and give a little overview of this project. This really started as a big idea from the city's comprehensive plan that was done a few years ago. Through that process, one of the things that came out was that the neighborhood really likes Avelinos and really kind of wants more of that at the intersection of Windsor and Osborne. So again, our task is to really create that development vision for those parcels around Windsor Parkway and Osborne Road, and really try to dig in and really see, okay, what does that really look like for the community? So again, this is not about the roundabout. This is not about Linwood Park itself. It's really about those few parcels right around the intersection. Our goal with this is to really get to that win-win-win. Really, how do we balance what your vision is as the neighborhood and the community with the property owners' goals and their property rights that they have, but also say, okay, we know what we kind of want here, but how does that fit within this very small site? So that's sort of been our challenge as the project team to try to figure that out. And we're really excited to share some concepts with you tonight that we think checks all three of these boxes. We started this project in July and we will be wrapping up sometime probably in early January. You can see here we are right in the middle of the process. We're in this sort of like flying geese V of people here in October. I mentioned earlier we had a previous meeting in September that introduced the project and we got a lot of really great preliminary input from folks. And we're really excited to share that input tonight and share what that has gone. What we'll do after tonight is we'll take the input we have from you all. And we'll also be posting these concepts online for about 10 days to get additional input. And then what we're going to do with all of those comments is try to come up with that final kind of draft concept that will move forward and we'll really put together an implementation strategy for how the city can help development move forward at this intersection. So we're really focused on a core group of 14 parcels right at the roundabout. We're looking at 3 of the 4 corners. So we're looking at the corners where Avelinos is, then across the way to the east, and then to the southwest. We're really not looking at those townhomes to the southeast at Brookhaven Glen. Those are kind of not on the table. They are what they are. We're really focused on those 3 other corners. These are just some images of what this looks like today. Well, not today, kind of pre-construction of the roundabout. But what's interesting about this area is that Linwood Park. I mean, this is a really beautiful neighborhood, and right now this intersection just does not align with how great of a neighborhood you all already have. It's just this very underdeveloped area that has a lot of potential. One of the first things that we did as the project team was we wanted to look at the parcel ownership. Again, when we look at these core 14 parcels, we really have 4 property owners here. We've talked to all of them through this process, and while these parcel sizes are small and kind of hard to work with, we were really encouraged to hear that the majority of these owners were really on board with this idea of like, yes, we want really neighborhood focused commercial uses like a coffee shop or another kind of version of Avelinos. This is what we want to do. This is why we have this plan. So we were really encouraged to hear that. Now that said, we also have 4 owners that we're trying to balance their goals and their visions with the communities as well. We also took a look at the zoning. There's really 2 zones here that are in play. These red parcels are zone C1, which is a commercial zone. And it's pretty much, it's kind of what it sounds like. You can have a lot of kind of shopfront type uses. It's really not a great match for sort of a neighborhood scaled development. So that's probably something that we'll be looking at in our implementation strategy. The other zone that we have here is residential. It's RS 75. So it's kind of a low density residential. So that's sort of our current constraint right now for the zoning side. What we heard a lot about in our previous public meeting and also through our online comment forum were a lot of comments about the roundabout. We know that there's a lot of concerns about it, particularly on the safety front, and it just seems like a very large piece of infrastructure. And we definitely hear that. And, we've incorporated this roundabout into the draft concepts. And, we're hopeful that, when you see the concepts, you'll see, how we've addressed safety concerns and really said, okay, this is happening, this is here. The good news is that we have a little bit more ability to handle more traffic because of this roundabout design. So let's make the most of that and see what can happen here. One of the other really great things that's been happening recently in this area is that the City of Brookhaven approved a new historic designation for Linwood Park. Linwood Park was DeKalb County's oldest all African-American community. It's a pretty unique place. And it's the home to really interesting people like the Olympic runner Mel Pender Jr. He's got there's a great book about him. If you haven't read it, really encourage you to do so. But we bring this up because one of the things that we really are charged with is not only what could development look like, but what's this sense of place? What is Linwood Park? What's that kind of gateway into the neighborhood? And one of the things that we would like to keep in mind is, hey, you've got this really interesting, unique heritage. Is there a way to kind of incorporate that through art, through other, historic markers? What are some ways that we can really kind of celebrate that history through something happening at this corner? So with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Amanda, to share a little bit about what we have heard so far in the process.
Good evening, everyone. So as Allison said, we've collected a lot of input today, and especially for a small area study. We got started back in August doing stakeholder interviews. We held 14 of those, and we met with representatives from the City of Brookhaven, both of the elected officials that represent the area, as well as the mayor, your planning commission representative. We also spoke to the folks that own the property within the planning area, as well as community representatives such as your Arts Council and some community groups. We also had the September 9th public meeting where we collected quite a bit of input. We had around 100 people. We know we had a cap on that meeting. We do not have a cap on this meeting, so invite more folks to come out to join us tonight if you've got their contact information. We also had a 10-day input window where people could provide input online. So we heard from roughly 130 people through both the in-person or the live meeting, as well as the online input window that followed. And lastly, we do have a website comment form. I imagine many of you on this meeting tonight have participated. We've heard from roughly 70 unique comments from folks through that channel. We also have 326 people on our outreach list. So thank you all for being very involved and helping make sure that we're hearing from the community, because that's really what, as Allison said, is driving the direction of this plan. On the next slide, we show a little bit of the input that we've collected through the stakeholder interviews. As I mentioned, we kind of bucket those into 3 different groups. When talking to the property owners, and we did speak to one developer that has development interest in the area, we found out that there's really a need from their perspective to see some flexibility from the city if we want to see this area develop in the future. So looking at some needs for potential zoning variances and creative development. There's also a perspective that there's a need to really work together among different property ownership. If we're going to see what the community wants to see here and what makes sense to the owners of these properties, there's going to need to be collaboration. And lastly, which is probably most important to the community, is knowing that most of the owners that we talked with were very focused on building something that really serves the community, that is thoughtful about the surrounding neighborhoods, and being very focused on something that works for Brookhaven. And so this process, I think, is very valuable to them to see what the community has to say. We did also talk with community representatives. Some of the key things we heard is, but a desire for small scale development, the importance of being respectful of the surrounding residential uses. So thinking through buffers and, appropriate transitions. We also heard through the interviews the need to really preserve the history and be mindful of the history of the area as development move forward, and thinking about ways that we can incorporate and further that preservation of history into the future. Lastly, I mentioned talking to your city representatives. It's very important to the city leadership that this area get activated to serve the community. They want it to make sure that it's bike and pedestrian friendly, focused again on this being a residential and a family-centric area, making sure that what's happening here is really serving the neighbors. Of course, there were also some comments about the natural resources being really in tune with the tree preservation, stormwater management, which are themes that we know are important to the Brookhaven community as a whole. So coming out of the stakeholder interviews, we focused our conversations at that first meeting series. A couple of things that we wanted to make sure we asked about, as Allison spoke to, much of the area is zoned commercial. So what type of commercial is appropriate? And what we heard from you all, from your neighbors, from community members that attended the meeting and participated online, is that we want, more than anything, informal commercial uses, particularly places like a cafe, a bakery, a coffee shop, an informal restaurant. And what we mean by that is a place where you would perhaps go up and order, and then you would sit down and the food would get delivered. Less interest in a sit-down restaurant and some other potential commercial uses that could come in, like retail. We also wanted to find out, as properties develop, what would make those properties really fit into the character of the community? What types of amenities would community members want to see incorporated in new development? And the biggest thing we heard was connection to sidewalks. And this is a theme we've been hearing across the board, is safety of pedestrians and making sure it's safe to get around. As Allison said, we've heard some about the roundabout. So safety really being centric, and particularly for people that are walking and enjoying the area. We also heard about those informal gathering spaces, which would come through in the comments on green space and outdoor patio. So how can those get incorporated and kind of contribute to the character of the area? And then less so some of the other things that you're seeing on the screen while I'm talking. We did also ask people about hopes and concerns for the future of the area. And as you'll see, the repetition of themes, the top thing was having development come in that serves the neighborhood. Again, like a coffee shop, a bakery, but not getting too crazy beyond that, that the development should be neighborhood focused, and that also there's a desire to beautify the space in the area. We did ask a lot at the first meeting series about public art. We asked about some creative commercial spaces, and we know that a greater dialogue probably needs to occur as we move forward and what that looks like. But beautification and what that means is something that could be further defined, and we'll get into that a little bit today. I don't want to not highlight, I know it's in writing there below, but we do know that you all, some of your neighbors do have concerns about future development here, particularly increased traffic and how traffic might go to different streets in the neighborhood, how the roundabout factors in, which is, as we said, outside of this project, but certainly related as we think about the area holistically, potential safety, and then being very mindful in what are ways to mitigate any potential impacts of more development. So as we said, we also have been getting a lot of comment online, a lot of similar things, a lot of things about safety, making sure it's pedestrian friendly, questions about the roundabout and why is that the timing of that in this project. But what you're seeing on the screen are some of the key kind of takeaways out of all of those comments. Green space and amenities. We want community gathering spaces. We want it to be family friendly. So what is our takeaway from that is that, again, the development needs to serve the local community rather than attract traffic. Now, you can have both. So Allison in a little bit will be talking about kind of some of the trade-offs and balancing act of having the type of things we want in the area and what that might mean from a traffic standpoint. We also heard about aesthetically appealing architecture and landscaping. So some other creative ideas. So some of the things that you'll see kind of come through, and potential things that could work well here are restaurant with patio, a beer garden, a bakery, an ice cream shop. These are all things that we've heard that community would love to see. So again, those neighborhood serving restaurants and informal spaces for the community to get together. And on this last slide, this is a little bit of something we talked about at the last meeting, but and I don't want to belabor what's up here because I know a lot of it's repetitive of things I've already said, but we are seeing mutual goals and common concerns, and then some creative ideas. I would say, you know, things that we're very mindful of and the city will be mindful of moving forward is the tree preservation, how the traffic circle integrates with any development proposals that move forward, addressing the parking issue, how do we fit parking to accommodate uses, and making sure that it's being good neighbors. So how this area serves the neighborhood versus it just being there. So really being mindful of how the two areas work together. And at the end of the day, we want a cohesive area that's special and just furthers what people love about the Windsor-Osborne area. And I think I keep talking here. Is that right, Allison? Perhaps I'll pause and see if there's any comments.
Yep, I'll stop sharing and we'll go over to you.
So one thing I'll tell you while I share my screen here is that we are about to do a polling exercise that we did at the last meeting, not the same questions, but the same tool. And so if you have a smartphone available, or if you want to pull up a separate browser on your computer screen or an iPad, we're going to ask you here in a minute to go to WooClap so you can answer some questions we have. And I'm going to do a check to make sure everyone's seeing my screen with draft guiding principles on it. Okay, great. So we've taken all this input from you all. We've been listening to people that own the property. We've been listening to your leadership. We've been listening to neighbors, other folks that are vested in the area. And from that, we've developed these draft guiding principles. And these are guiding principles that would guide development, future development in the area as your city staff is looking at development proposals and potentially considering changes to site plans, things of that nature. These are things that we felt like we heard and have pulled out of the input. I'll just briefly read through them. And there's 10 of them, but I think it's important to highlight them each. When we're done going through this, we're going to go over to a polling app and find out if you agree that this is a guiding principle that should guide future development, or you disagree, or you're not sure. And if you're not sure, we're going to want to see comments from you in the chat. So I know you're probably looking at them while I'm talking, but I'll briefly go through them. Respect neighborhood scale and character. So what the community feels like today, those development patterns, the tree coverage, that's kind of everything that falls in character, how buildings sit on the street. Improve safety and connectivity for pedestrians. Want to minimize parking impacts on the neighborhood. Cultivate space for neighborhood serving small businesses. Want to minimize additional residential uses. Encourage outdoor gathering spaces. Maximize green space and tree preservation. Balance neighborhood vision with property owner goals and development rights. Facilitate collaboration across property owners, and last, further a unique sense of place. And so with that, I will bump us to the next slide.